Hello, everyone. For most of his career, Tommy Lee Jones has been defined by restraint, a man whose presence communicates more through silence than spectacle, and when he finally chose to speak after the quiet but unsettling discovery involving Victoria on New Year's Day, his words carried a gravity that immediately shifted the tone of the conversation. Not because he offered sensational detail, but because he allowed the public to see the emotional cost of living through a moment that shattered routine, certainty, and the protective distance he has always maintained between his private life and the outside world. And according to those close to him, the days following the discovery were marked by a stillness that felt heavier than chaos, the kind of stillness that forces reflection rather than reaction. And when Tommy eventually addressed it, he did so with careful language that revealed how deeply the event had unsettled him, not as a public figure, but as a man confronting the fragility of life and the weight of responsibility that comes with being connected to someone whose story suddenly became a point of public curiosity. And he acknowledged that New Year's Day, a time traditionally associated with renewal and optimism, became instead a moment frozen in shock, one that disrupted the rhythm of his life and reminded him how quickly the boundaries between past and present can collapse. And while he avoided specifics, his reflections suggested a complicated mixture of grief, concern, and self-examination, as if the discovery forced him to revisit choices, relationships, and silences he had long believed were settled. And what stood out most was his admission that fame does not insulate anyone from moments that feel deeply personal and painfully human, because when something unexpected surfaces, no amount of experience or emotional discipline can fully prepare you for the internal reckoning that follows. And Tommy spoke about the discomfort of watching private pain become a subject of speculation, not out of anger, but out of a sense of sadness that modern attention often strips moments of their dignity, and he hinted that Victoria's story, whatever the public imagined it to be, deserved more care than headlines could provide, and in doing so he subtly pushed back against the culture of instant conclusions, reminding listeners that real lives are rarely defined by a single moment, especially one discovered rather than explained. And as he reflected on the days after New Year's, he described a period of withdrawal, not as avoidance but as necessity, a need to sit with the uncertainty rather than rush toward answers that may never fully exist. And this was perhaps the most revealing aspect of his silence, because for a man known for decisiveness on screen, the real-life response was patience, restraint, and an acceptance that some situations demand stillness rather than action. And he spoke about the importance of honoring complexity, acknowledging that the truth of any situation often lives in layers, not declarations, and that rushing to define it can do more harm than good, especially when the people involved are more than characters in a story. And as he continued, his tone shifted from guarded to contemplative, suggesting that the discovery had prompted him to reassess how he measures time, legacy, and connection. Because moments like these strip away illusion and leave behind only what truly matters, and he admitted that aging brings with it a sharper awareness of how quickly circumstances can change, how unfinished conversations linger, and how silence, while often protective, can sometimes become its own burden. And without directly assigning meaning or blame, Tommy's words conveyed a deep respect for the seriousness of what had occurred, emphasizing that some events are not meant to be consumed as entertainment, but processed with empathy and restraint. And fans who expected dramatic revelation instead encountered something quieter but more powerful. A man acknowledging that he does not have all the answers, that some questions remain unresolved, and that living honestly sometimes means accepting ambiguity. And as his statement concluded, there was no attempt to close the narrative neatly, no effort to reclaim control of the story, only a request, implicit rather than spoken, for space, understanding, and a recognition that behind the public figure is someone navigating a moment that altered the emotional landscape of his life. And in that sense, Tommy Lee Jones breaking his silence was less about explaining what happened and more about revealing how profoundly it affected him, leaving audiences not with shock but with a sobering reminder that real life does not always offer clarity, only the opportunity to respond with dignity. Thanks for watching.